your voice to the conversation in the comments section.
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, welcome to Dewbs & Co with me, Bev Turner, for one night only while Michelle takes a well-earned break. Thank you for watching. Stay with us and get involved, won't you, on all the usual social channels. Now, later, Labour won a by-election in Birmingham yesterday. Who knew, right? Well, if this event passed you by, you are not alone. But don't these local by-elections offer us a fascinating glimpse into whether, as a nation, we are feeling increasingly politically homeless and, frankly, fed up to the back teeth with the whole sorry state of politics. Perhaps in part because of stories such as Gavin Williamson receiving a knighthood. We're going to be discussing that a bit later too. First up, though, my panel and I will be ruminating on the fact that the Winter Paralympics kicks off today without Russian and Belarusian athletes. Is that really fair? They've trained for years for that one chance of Paralympic glory. And isn't it the Putin regime rather than a bunch of snowboarders who are attacking Ukraine? Do you think these sort of punitive gestures do anything to help the Ukrainian people? Or maybe you think that Russian athletes simply have no place on the slopes in Beijing? I'm not convinced. We're going to be chatting to one Paralympian at the top of the show, so don't go anywhere. But first, with the news headlines, here's Tamsin Roberts.
Bev, thank you. Good evening from the GB newsroom. The world narrowly averted a nuclear catastrophe overnight when a fire broke out at a nuclear power plant in Ukraine. That's according to the US ambassador for the United Nations. The Zaporizhzhia power station, the largest in Europe, caught fire after Russian forces battled for control of the plant. Boris Johnson has called Moscow actions a direct threat to the safety of all of Europe. The Russian envoy to the UN says the plant is working normally and that the background radiation levels in the area are normal also. But Linda Thomas-Greenfield told an emergency UN meeting that the attack was a dangerous new escalation.
Russia's attack last night put Europe's largest nuclear power at grave risk. It was incredibly reckless and dangerous, and it threatened the safety of civilians across Russia, Ukraine, and Europe.
NATO entering Ukraine and fighting could lead to widespread war in Europe, according to Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg.
With the cities under siege, schools, hospitals, and residential buildings shelled, reckless actions around a nuclear power plant last night, and many civilians killed or wounded. The days to come are likely to be worse.
The Metropolitan Police is gathering evidence in relation to alleged war crimes in Ukraine. It's in support of the International Criminal Court investigation. Detectives in the Met's War Crimes team are appealing for anyone in the UK who may have direct evidence of war crimes in Ukraine from November 2013 to present. Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba claims there have been civilian atrocities, but says they have to trust in international law.
When bombs fall on your cities, when soldiers rape women in the occupied cities, and we have numerous cases, it's difficult, of course, to speak about the efficiency of the international law. But this is the only tool of civilization that is available to us to make sure that in the end, eventually, all those who made this war possible will be brought to justice.
Well, speaking from the Polish border, Home Secretary Priti Patel says it was heartbreaking to have met Ukrainians forced from their homeland because of the Russian invasion. She's there to launch the Ukraine Family Scheme, which allows anyone settled in the UK to bring their Ukrainian family to safety. Well, our reporter Paul Hawkins is at the Polish border and he joins us now. Paul, the UN Refugee Agency says 1 million people have fled Ukraine in the last 7 days. Just tell us, what's the situation there?
Yeah, we're at Dorohusk, which is about 330 miles west of Kiev at the border, one of 11 crossings between Ukraine and Poland. If I just about shot here at the moment, you can see many people here waiting to collect some of the Ukrainians that are coming across the border. As you said there, over 1 million have left Ukraine, 672,500 according to the Polish government entering Poland. Just to give you an idea, that's half the number who claimed asylum across all of Europe during the 2015 refugee crisis. So thousands still coming across the border. If you have a look up here, actually, you can see the buses here on the border that are waiting to collect Ukrainians that are arriving across the border and then taking them not just off to Ukraine, but off to Germany. Sorry, not just off to Poland, but off to Germany as well. And you can see that the facilities that have sprung up here within a week to look after the thousands of refugees that are streaming across the border. It is cold, very cold, just above freezing at the moment. It's very dark. It's really not a place where you want to be bringing children, where you want to be bringing families, and those that are lucky enough are getting taken away from the border.
OK, Paul, for now, thank you very much. That's GBNews, Paul Hawkins at the Polish border there. In other news, Australian cricket great Shane Warne has died aged 52, regarded as one of the finest bowlers of all time. His management have said in a statement that he died of a suspected heart attack at his villa in Thailand. The news is the second devastating blow for Australian cricket within 24 hours, with fellow great Rod Marsh also dying today, having suffered a heart attack last week. Former England and Yorkshire cricketer Sir Geoffrey Boycott told GB News Warne transformed cricket and says he's one of the greatest bowlers of all time. This is GB News on TV, online and DAB+ radio. Now, let's get straight back to Dewbs & Co.
Good evening. You will have noticed I am not Michelle Dewberry tonight. I am Bev Turner and I am here until 7 o'clock. Now, let me introduce my panel to you this evening. I'm joined by Daniel Moylan, former advisor to Boris Johnson, now a Conservative peer. On my left is Frank Faridi, author and academic. And next to Frank, very nice to see you, it is Labour councillor Peymana Assad. I also want to know your thoughts, of course, tonight, so do get in touch with me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or on Twitter. You can find us at GBNews, or personally, I am on @Beverly Turner, and we're going to get to as many of your messages as I can. Can I also remind you to please subscribe to our YouTube page? You can watch live or see the best bits from the channel when you search GB News. Now, after the relative success of the Winter Olympics in China, today saw the opening ceremony for the Paralympics. The striking cooling towers and urban landscape of Beijing may be in attendance, but the Russian and Belarusian athletes were not. Due to the war in Ukraine, they've been sent home. Now, on Wednesday, the International Paralympic Committee ruled that the athletes from the two countries would be able to compete under a neutral flag, but they made a dramatic U-turn on that decision yesterday. Now, the IPC's president, Andrew Parsons, said that the situation in the athletes' village had become untenable as several countries threatened to boycott the Games in protest. Personally, I find the idea that the athletes were targeted by others pretty hard to believe. We're hoping that we can talk to a Paralympian if we can get hold of her in just a couple of minutes. But I want to know what our panel think about this. Frank, if I can come to you, these gestures are obviously meant to cast Russia on the global stage as the pariah. Do they do that, or do you feel quite sorry for these athletes?
Well, I really feel sorry for them, and I'm conflicted because one moment I think it's a good decision, then it's a bad decision. But the more I think about it, I think this is really a form of cheap impression management. You're demonstrating you're doing something very effective, whereas all you're doing is you're targeting people that aren't necessarily involved or implicated or responsible for the attack on the Ukraine. And what I'm really worried about is that if we allow kind of momentum to build up against Russian people in general, then what we end up doing is we kind of fail to understand that there's a distinction between the oligarchy that runs Russia and ordinary Russian people, and we don't want to criminalize a whole nation, which is becoming visible here and there. So on balance, although I understand the decision, I feel very bad about it.
Me too. And, you know, these Olympians, these Paralympians, they have trained some of these athletes from almost when they could walk. You know, some of these sports are the sports that they do from being children. They might get one opportunity to be on an Olympic stage. Peymana, do you think that Frank is right, though? When we do this, we risk casting a whole nation as the enemy as opposed to the Putin regime, and that can backfire on civilians in countries all across the world.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with some of that. I think that, you know, yesterday I was speaking to some civil society leaders from Russia who were saying that they are against the war and they're out on the streets protesting and being illegally detained by the Russian police. And so I agree that we shouldn't cast all Russians as criminals because of what President Putin is doing in Ukraine. But I do think that this sends a message. I think this sends a very clear message to Russians and to President Putin that he will face isolation everywhere on an international stage if he continues with this war. And I think that that's the right message to send, considering the current circumstances. I mean, we just heard from someone from Ukraine talking about some of the war crimes being committed by Russian troops. And so we really need to find out the facts and investigate. But the last thing I do want to say on this is that we only took a diplomatic boycott to the Winter Olympics in response to what China was doing to the Uyghurs. And so our athletes still, you know, took part in those Winter Olympics. And so I think sometimes we don't send a strong enough message, but I think this is the right tone. Is it right, though, Daniel? Because I don't think that using the athletes as a pawn in this game I'm not very comfortable with that. Yeah, I was married to an Olympic gold medalist, and so I saw what they did. My brother swam in the Olympics, so I've seen the commitment that those individuals make on the stage and what the sacrifice to win at their sport. And the idea that if Boris Johnson had taken some sort of action in conflict on the eve of an Olympics and the people that I knew and loved had been taken out of those events, I think there'd be a huge amount of anger and resentment. What do you think?
Well, I think you're completely wrong to think about this in terms of individuals, and indeed Frank and Peymana. This is a boycott of Russian institutions. This is the Russian Olympic and Paralympic Committee. These people represent them. They're not competing as individuals. They've had funding, they've had training. And now there's going to be, I hope, a boycott, a cultural and sporting boycott that is absolutely thorough and comprehensive and will probably last for 20 or 30 years if Putin gets his way and occupies Ukraine. And there is, of course, we can all still hope that he won't be able to do that. But if he gets his way and occupies Ukraine, there can be no forgiveness. There needs to be economic isolation, there needs to be financial isolation, but very importantly, total cultural and sporting isolation as well. until they go away, and that may take 20 or 30 years.
I personally think that what you're talking about there is effectively dehumanising these athletes, and for me, part of the problem with war is that it dehumanises
I'm not dehumanising
so many
them,
individuals.
but you cannot say it's the same if you say you're not going to have the Bolshoi Ballet come on tour, or you're not going to have the Leningrad Philharmonic come on tour. It's not the individuals you're targeting. It's not the first violinist. It's not the prima ballerina. It's the institution. You cannot expect those people to be coming on tour in Europe in the
unfortunately,
future.
we have our Paralympic guest, I believe, but unfortunately, they are the individuals who will be targeted.
Yeah, but you're not going to let the institutions in under that cover. Sorry, just not going to happen.
Let's hear from our Olympian now. We're joined by Olivia Breen. She knows what it takes to reach the pinnacle of their sport. Olivia's a two-time Paralympic bronze medalist in the 4x100 metre relay and the long jump. Olivia, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Now, this decision affects 71 Russian athletes and 12 Belarusians. If we just take the politics out of it for a second, which Daniel would say is a mistake, just tell us, how will these athletes be feeling right now?
I think, if I'm honest, obviously being an athlete myself, I would be completely heartbroken. All the hard work you put in and all the sacrifice, and it's heartbreaking for them. And I feel really upset for them as well. So I think it's really tough.
Would you, though, if you were in their shoes, would you feel this was a sacrifice that you would have to make in order to help a conflict come to an end? Because, of course, that is the reason why this decision has been taken by the IPC. Would there be any part of you that would feel that it was just?
I think the Paralympic sport has to stand by the rest of the world to support of the Ukraine. So I think they did the right thing. But obviously, from an athlete's point of view, it would be heartbreaking. But I think they would understand why they had to do it. But all the hard work they've sacrificed over the years, that would be very hard for them to come to terms with, basically.
There's a rumour, I guess we can call it that, it hasn't been entirely confirmed, Olivia, that part of the reason this decision has been made is because there was a bit of political infighting in the Olympic Village between athletes that was making it very uncomfortable for everybody. Can you imagine that happening, or does sport generally feel a politics-free zone for the athletes?
But I think, obviously, it's happened so quickly with the Ukraine in the last 2 weeks, and obviously it's kicked off, so it's all happened so quickly. But I think it would be very uncomfortable with the rumours going around in the Olympic Village for sure, and the uncertainty as an athlete, thinking, oh, what's going to happen? Am I going to compete? Am I not going to compete? Am I going to be sent home? And it's very hard. They've gone all that way to Beijing. Now they've got to fly back without not competing.
Absolutely. Olivia, thank you so much. I'm sure, like me, you would wish the best of luck to all of our British competitors in the next 10 days. Thank you so much for joining us. You see, Daniel, when you hear that, when you look at somebody like Olivia and you think of the sacrifices she's made, you still believe categorically this is the right thing to do?
For some reason, going back over 100 years, the Olympics decided to organise themselves on the basis of national teams. They didn't have to do that. It could have been on the basis of individuals competing on merit. They decided to organise themselves on the basis of national teams. Athletes come there representing Russia. They're not welcome. They're not welcome with Russia shelling buildings, residential buildings, endangering power stations. We hear allegations of raping women. They're just not welcome representing Russia. I entirely understand that. And it's got to be kept up possibly for decades, and more than just in sport, as I say, in culture, performances, bands, whatever. This is not going to be allowed to, should not be allowed to happen.
Thanks.
It's not targeting individuals
Frank,
at
isn't
all.
It? For the individuals, it's brutal.
Well, it's brutal, but also I think it's, the more I listen to Daniel, the more I think this is totally wrong, because it seems to me that what we're doing is finding the easy option. We can easily isolate individuals. So, for example, an individual conductor of a classical orchestra in Germany was told to pack his bag and go home. So you can easily target individuals, whilst at the same time, the West is very reluctant to really get stuck into the situation.
Yeah.
So we got a lot of laptop generals in NATO who are kind of looking at things from afar, whilst at the same time we do these kind of performative, sort of impression management kind of steps.
That's why we need tougher sanctions. We need tougher sanctions, and the UK has not put tougher sanctions on Russia. I mean, you can see the debate in Parliament about, individuals who have considerable amounts of money and have property in the UK who are not being sanctioned for their connection to President Putin. And so I think that's the direction we should be going. But I think this is the right move right now in terms of sending a message to President Putin that what he's doing in Ukraine is unacceptable and he will face international isolation at every stage.
OK, thank you all. OK, still in Russia, forces have seized the largest nuclear plant in Europe, according to Ukrainian authorities today. It comes hours after a fire broke out at a plant in eastern Ukraine following a Russian attack. The fire has since been extinguished, and officials say that the site is safe. It's day 8 of the war now, of course, with no sign of it coming to an end. It feels like a very long 8 days, doesn't it? So how receptive should the West be at this stage to Vladimir Putin's demands? You've been sending in your opinions on this. I'm going to get to those in just a moment. But I want to ask our panel, Frank, your take on it at the moment. President Putin and his regime are relentless, are they not? What do we do at this stage, 8 days in?
I think somewhere along the line we've got to step up our response. At the moment, we're kind of hoping that things will just kind of fizzle out, or alternatively, there was this very pessimistic idea that Ukraine will just fall, and therefore the West would be absolved of the responsibility of making any difficult decisions. I think at some point in time, even something like a no-fly zone will have to be considered as a realistic option. You have to remember that Ukraine is the largest nation between Russia and the rest of Europe. It's the largest buffer state. If Ukraine goes, then those little countries like Estonia, Latvia, will be very much at risk. And unless we basically do something a bit more robust than we're doing at the moment, I think that we're going to be paying a very, very high price for this.
What worries me, Paymana, is that the price will be higher for the West the more that we get involved. And if it involves creating a no-fly zone and there is actual combat between British planes and Russian planes, we are in a very desperate and potentially extremely violent and bloody scenario.
I think, as someone who came to the UK as a child refugee from, what was started in Afghanistan from a Soviet invasion, and that led to decades of violence in the country. I think that what Europe needs to do is really, really think about what exactly the next steps are going to be. And I think that Frank is right in terms of thinking about a no-fly zone. I think we haven't been tough enough with Putin. That's why we're at this stage right now. When he annexed Crimea, when he took the 2 states within Ukraine at the moment, that he's recognized as independent states. We did not do the actions that we were supposed to do in 2014 and 2008. And that's why we are at this stage right now. And so I think that a no-fly zone must be looked at seriously. But I think that we should do everything that we possibly can to divert from war, because war ruins people's lives. And I've seen that up front.
Daniel, I think we all share this sense, don't we, that something else has to be done, but we're very nervous about what that next step would look like and what it would lead to. Well,
let's be clear. Paymana says we want to have a no-fly zone, but we don't have war. A no-fly zone is a declaration of war. It's a declaration of war in Ukrainian space against Russian forces. And first I'd ask my colleagues, what legal basis do they think we have for declaring war on Russia at the moment, since they haven't actually attacked us? Well, Ukraine is not, we are not tied to Ukraine as an ally through NATO. It'd be a different matter if it was a NATO ally. So the first question is, what legal basis do we have? And the second question is, what do they think the consequences of this are going to be?
I think there is a sense in which we're talking about Ukrainian sovereign airspace. We're not talking about going into Russian airspace. We're talking about allowing the Ukrainians to gain control over the airspace. But there are steps that can be taken that fall way short of a war. For example, General Wesley Clark, the American general, suggests that perhaps one of the things that could be done now is to allow Poland to fly more planes into Ukraine and allow the Ukrainians to have greater military hardware so that they can control the sky. So there are things that could be done that we're not doing at the moment, because it's not good enough just to give Ukrainians anti-tank weapons. They could really use having more airplanes so they could have a greater control over the sky. And I just think we can have a measured step-by-step approach where we escalate our response without necessarily saying we're going whole hog all the way.
My response to you is, what's the alternative? If there's no fly zone, if we don't implement that, then what's the alternative? Do we allow Putin to take Ukraine completely? Do we allow him to be successful in his aims of colonizing Ukraine? Because that is what his aims are. And the question is this is what the Ukrainians have asked for us. They know their country better than we do. They know exactly what they need to defend their country. So what is the alternative?
OK. Well, you have been sending in your responses as well. Stephen has got in touch with us at GB News on Twitter to say the Paralympic athletes belong to Russia. They should be allowed to compete. This is just a propaganda war and it is wrong. Nina agrees it's vital that athletes from Russia and Belarus... Oh, no, I apologise, she doesn't agree. She's with you, Daniel. It's vital that they are banned from competing. I feel very sorry for them. And Linda has said, I could not agree with you less. Please understand that the end of Mr. Putin is in the hands of Russians. Unless the Russian people feel the pain, nothing will change. David, you are a breath of fresh air, this person says. I think they mean Daniel. But sadly, I do not agree. Any sanctions will affect the entire Russian population, although it does not seem fair the implementation of sanctions is the right approach. Well, as I say, I'm not convinced on that one, but thank you all for your contributions. Now, coming up, Labour wins the Birmingham-Erdington by-election, but did the turnout leave the impression that we are all feeling politically homeless?
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Bev Turner. A reminder, with me until 7. My panel are here: Daniel Moylan, former advisor to Boris Johnson, now a Conservative peer; Frank Faridi, author and academic; and Labour councillor Peymana Assed. Now, Labour has held the Birmingham-Erdington in the by-election yesterday, triggered by the sad and sudden death of frontbencher Jack Dromey. So congratulations to former nurse and mother of 5, Paulette Hamilton, who won with a majority of 3,266 ahead of her Conservative rival, making her the first black MP elected from a Birmingham constituency. But the by-election failed to inspire voters with a turnout of just 27%. Now, this may not surprise you. More and more people feel politically homeless right now, don't we? Conservative voters who believe that lockdowns were a bit unnecessary, perhaps, and they don't feel an affinity to Boris and his henchmen, but we look to Labour and we see Keir Starmer constantly asking for more restrictions, more mandates and more state control. The Greens are living on a borrowed time, it seems, and the Lib Dems are washing around somewhere in the middle with no clear identity. So, do you understand why many people currently feel politically homeless? Let me know what you think. Now, Frank, I have to come to you first, Daniel, sorry. You stood in this seat. I said you were the first person one of the first people to have it, but actually, you didn't win.
No, it's a little-known fact in British recorded political history that the Conservative Party candidate in 1983, the general election in Birmingham, Erdington, was me.
Well done.
And I nearly won it. I lost by 236 votes, a number I will never forget.
That's
and it's still the case that Erdington deserves a good Conservative MP. And it's a great pity what happened yesterday. But they will eventually get a good Conservative MP because we'll win it one day in the future. So that's what I'd say. As far as are people engaged with politics, yeah, I can understand why you can present this as a negative. The fact that people don't feel tribally, I mean, a lot of people do feel tribally involved with a political party, but many nowadays don't. But there's a positive side to it as well, because what I think it does is it shows that people are much more critical of political parties. They're much more willing to look at different political parties. And I think that helps keep political parties, so to speak, on their toes, because they have to work harder to get people to vote for them. So you can see an upside to it as well.
I can. So you mean traditionally people would have said, well, my father voted for Labour, so I will vote for Labour.
Yeah, so I don't have to think about whether I like what Labour is doing. Now people, Labour, Conservatives, Lib Dems, they're much more discerning about what it is they might like. So I can see an upside to it as well as a downside. By the way, can I just put a small protest in here?
Go on.
I do think that saying Boris and his henchmen is an astonishingly prejudicial way of referring to the cabinet. But never mind.
Well, you know,
I didn't want to let you get away with that.
Well, I'm not going to let you actually call me out on that, because I think that a lot of people in the last 2 years do feel that henchman is the right word. It feels like he's had his gang.
They go around killing people. That's what henchmen do.
That's true, but I think if you look at the people that Boris Johnson's had around him in the last 2 years, and a lot of PPI deals that weren't exactly by the book, it feels a little bit like people in Number 10 have been stuffing suitcases full of money before they can run out of the door.
In the emergency of a pandemic, when there was a global shortage of PPE, I think you mean PPE.
Sorry, PPE, yes.
A global shortage of PPE, and everything was thrown at getting as much PPE to this country as possible because there were pictures of nurses, poor nurses, with bin bags on their heads. That had to be addressed. And now you here are, sort of saying that is equivalent to Putin going around poisoning people.
Oh, I'm not saying it's equivalent. I didn't say it was equivalent
henchman
at all.
is what that is saying. I think you should wash your mouth out there, Boris and his henchmen. This is the cabinet of the United Kingdom, of Her Majesty's government.
And they have to work harder to earn our respect. But let me go to Paynama. Would you agree with my assessment that Boris Johnson and his henchmen have undermined the trust that we might have once had in them in the last couple of years?
I think trust for the Tories is reducing across the country. I think that we can see that in the backlash to some of the things that came out in regards to his cheese and wine parties in Number 10, and also the contracts that you just mentioned that members of his cabinet were dishing out to their friends. That case about the bin bags with nurses was actually in Harrow, in Northwick Park Hospital. That's exactly where it was. So we were very, very infuriated by that. But I think that there are some positives from this. 3,000 plus is a comfortable majority win for a Labour seat, and also Paulette Hamilton has made history. She's the first black MP in this seat, and she's a former nurse and a mother of 5. So I think that there are considerable positives to take from this. But I do agree that there is apathy in politics. I think people struggle to find the difference between Labour and Conservatives. But I think more and more as we get ahead towards the election, people can find the difference between us. One party is all about supporting their friends and giving them contracts with money, and the other one is about serving the people.
Frank, I don't know whether you align yourself publicly with any political party, but I think that this idea even of left and right has become pretty anachronistic at the moment. I think we can almost divide politically the people down the lines of whether they are libertarian or whether they are authoritarian, and I know that's something that you do have an opinion on.
Yeah, I do. It seems to me that what we have is a kind of a zombie concept, which is left and right, which is denuded of any meaning. And I think it's unfortunate that politics is running on empty. And Conservative Party members that I know are not conservative in the way that they would have been classically. Labour Party members who used to actually speak up for the working class are conspicuous by their absence in the Labour Party.
We're trying our best to bring it back to the world.
Well, good luck to you on that.
Thank you.
I think it's a bit of a fool's errand myself. But it seems to me that the real problem that we have now is that there are millions of people who are looking for a voice. There are millions of people who would like to have somebody, some party, some individuals who could give meaning to their lives and to their future. And I think that, unfortunately, since Brexit, the promise of Brexit has not really been realized for a number of reasons. People who were for Brexit have just fallen by the wayside or forgot about that important moment. And what we're left with are career politicians on all sides who kind of speak to a script. They refuse to be spontaneous. And when you look at the Birmingham by-election, I see it a little bit differently than you do. Because what strikes me is that Labour should be mobilizing a lot of people, given the poor performance of the Tory government. I mean, they should be getting a lot of people behind them. And what you got is a very low turnout at a time when you would expect there to be far more people saying, I love the Labour Party. They're the only ones that are standing up for me. But instead, you have this very perfunctory going through the motion. And that, I think, represents a threat to democracy.
Yeah. I think that, one of the reasons I can provide for that is obviously, 2 years of a pandemic. It's been a really tough time. And also, we haven't been out on the doors as much to talk to people and to try and get that Labour message out. But now that the restrictions have been rolled back, we have that opportunity to do that. And this was the first test. And I think that we've proven that we can win, and it's a comfortable win. But we definitely have work to do. I do want to say something, though, about how representative our elected representatives are. They need to come from our communities and actually have lived experiences of what it's like to live in these communities and go through the problems that these communities face. And unfortunately, our democracy isn't representative of that. They sometimes come mainly from Eton and Oxbridge.
Daniel, I'm looking at you. Does Paymena have a point there that actually that our political class does not represent the country sufficiently and that there is something wrong with the system? And whilst it appears to be an occupation of the elites, a world that is a Westminster bubble, which may not be relevant to somebody in Bolton.
Well, that's two
there's going to be political disenchantment.
Points there. The first point is we have, if you look at other European countries, we have in all the major political parties, we have by far and away the most diverse, ethnically diverse parliament of any European country. And if you look at the European Parliament, you'd struggle to find a black face in it.
I don't disagree with that. I think we do very well in that regard.
We are very diverse, and that is something to be welcome. And I don't think we should be going on. I don't think that is the key issue. The second question is to do with, are people in the Westminster bubble, all of them, irrespective of ethnic or background or whatever, are they cut off from the real world? And in a sense, they always are going to be, because you elect people to the House of Commons to do a job. And the job requires skills and techniques and practice and experience, like all jobs of any importance. And in doing that, they tend to specialise and develop, their own way of talking, their own way of collaborating, their own way of working. So MPs are there 4 days a week. Now, thank heavens we still have a first-past-the-post system, which ties MPs to individual constituencies, because at least on a Friday and a weekend, Friday afternoon and a weekend, nearly all of our MPs, again across all parties, are actually out in their constituencies. They're going to their constituencies, they're meeting people, they're going to events, and it might just be opening something or just going to a school or whatever it might be, but it is meeting people in the community.
It's not walking in the shoes, though, is it? It's not growing up as those people.
It's not walking in the shoes, but it's a great deal closer than you have in many countries, especially in Europe, where you've got proportional representation and you've cut that tie with the individual constituency. I think we're doing not too badly.
I think in terms of the diversity, I don't think we are doing that badly. But I think in terms of socio-economic diversity, I still think there's quite a long way to go.
Yeah, I think there's one problem as well, which is that although Daniel is right, that we want our MPs to be experts in certain fields and technically competent, what has occurred in the recent decade is that they become culturally distinct from the rest of society. So the cultural ideals and the values they have is often very, very different than millions and millions of people in communities throughout the country. And you can often see this very often when, for example, Theresa May introduces, sort of her transgenderist obsessions, and new laws are passed, that is a concern of her and the group that she hangs out with, who are culturally very distinct to the rest of England and of Scotland, where people have a very different view on these kinds of matters. And I think the key thing for us is to somehow find a way of getting politicians to represent the cultural ideals and norms of everyday society, which I think needs to be taken into account and needs to be given some kind of recognition.
Well, let's see what you have been saying here. Andrew has said in relation to being politically homeless, yes, I do understand why people feel like this at the moment. He says politicians keep saying one thing and doing another. The Lib Dems and the Greens are only interested if your life focus is on trans issues and banning cars. And Mark has said, why don't we all just vote for the independents and give all these politicians something to think about? CJ said 27% turnout is about right for the city. Generally, there is total apathy when it comes to voting overall, which is why we've been totally dominated by a woke, socialist-loving, money-wasting, Labour-run council for the last millennia. It might be that 27% is about right, but just to give you an idea, in Birmingham, Erdington, in 2019, there were 35,000 people turned out to vote. Yesterday or day before, there was only 17,000, almost half. I guess it's a by-election, not a general election. But I think the danger with this is if we have a disillusioned electorate, is that not enough people will vote whoever they're going to vote for. And I think probably the one thing we would all agree on this panel is we would like to see a more engaged society.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, of course.
On that. I mean, we'd like to see everybody voting in a sense.
Yeah.
But
do you think it should be compulsory?
No, I don't.
Daniel?
I don't actually think it should be compulsory. But if it was made compulsory, I would live with that. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, but I don't actually think it should be made compulsory. No.
Yeah, I think in Australia it's compulsory.
Yeah, well, I know.
And it has the
great example of compulsory behaviour right now. I don't really want to emulate that. But Penama, can I just ask you, do you think we should be looking towards, and I know this is, from a technological point of view, it is very complex, it would be very expensive. Should we be looking towards online voting to engage the younger generation, who, frankly, some of the millennials are too lazy to walk to the town hall on a Thursday afternoon? What would you think?
I mean, I really love the idea of going to the polling station and actually filling out my ballot box and then putting it in.
Yeah,
putting it
the ritual.
Exactly.
It's
that feeling.
I never
it's very
vote
old
by
school.
post.
Yeah, it's very old school, but it gives me that feeling of actually I've done my duty towards, representational democracy. And I think that we should keep it that way. But I think in the future we'll probably have to look at online voting, unfortunately, because first of all, we need to get people interested in politics by talking about the issues that they actually care about and they actually resonate with. And then second, obviously, is trying to make it more easier for them to get out.
But there's no technical solution to a political problem. And the attempt to rely on online voting bypasses the real issues. And secondly, I think ultimately it's anti-democratic. Because I think we expect people to have the commitment to get out of their bed and go to the voting booth and not just sit at home in their digital bedroom and expect things to change.
And people fought for that right, especially women in this country.
Well, unfortunately, a lot of the young people will sit in their bedrooms until we can introduce online voting. I think the numbers are going to be low. OK, coming up, following the announcement that former Education Secretary Gavin Williamson has been awarded a knighthood, we ask if the honour has been devalued.
On Mark Dolan tonight, the latest on the sudden death of cricket legend Shane Warne. Sacked Telegraph cartoonist Bob Moran is my Mark Meets guest, one of the few artists who spoke out against COVID restrictions. In the big question, should Britain go for a universal basic income? Also, why didn't the Labour Party grant GB News an interview with their by-election winning candidate Paulette Hamilton? Plus, my alternative news headlines featuring Sir Gavin Williamson. And in my big opinion, it's time to get back to the office. See you at 9.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Bev Turner. Now, a reminder of my panel. Daniel Moylan is here, former advisor to Boris Johnson. Don't hold it against him. Now a Conservative peer. Frank Faridi, author and academic, and Labour councillor Peymana Assad. Now, you may have heard yesterday the announcement that former Education Secretary Gavin Williamson will be knighted. It's been met by some fierce criticism in a move described by opposition parties as an insult to parents, teachers and children. Prime Minister Boris Johnson nominated Williamson for the honour, which was approved by the Palace yesterday. Head teachers and education union leaders expressed their shock and surprise. Williamson was condemned for the way that he handled disruption to the schools during the pandemic and the grading of GCSEs and A-levels after the exams were cancelled. So, has this announcement devalued the knighthood? Daniel, I'm going to come to you first because I'm sure you're going to give me a hard time again. I feel a telling off coming on. Tell me whether you think he deserves it. I am a parent of children that were in the lockdowns with an 18-year-old who missed his GCSEs, etc. It was shambolic how that was handled. The messaging, how it changed, how there was one route to assessment when the algorithm was then realised to be wrong and it became teacher assessment. Why would this man be rewarded now at this stage?
Well, let's start with the fact that you report as if it's of neutral news interest that head teachers and trade teaching union officials have condemned it. Frankly,
he's not popular.
It could have been Mother Teresa. They'd still be condemning her if it was because she was a Conservative education secretary. We have had nothing but opposition and resistance from trade unions, education trades unions, to Conservative policies and Conservative politicians for every year we've been in power. So I put that at no account whatsoever. The second thing is, I mean, it was obviously every aspect of the pandemic was extremely difficult for the government to handle, and not everything went right. That's absolutely true. But there has been resistance from trades unions, from teachers' unions, rightly or wrongly, to pandemic measures throughout all of this. There was never an approach of collaboration. There was always a defensiveness. There was always a resistance to what the government was trying to do, which I think made it extremely difficult for Department for Education officials to work it out. Now, the algorithm, all right, the algorithm thing, I didn't fully understand all the details. That was probably something that got wrong in the machine. But I think to land all this on Gavin Williamson, who was a fantastic chief whip, who's just a northern lad from a comprehensive who's done well, but another reason I think people are having a go at him, to land all this on Gavin Williamson and say that all of that should be borne on his shoulders, I think is extremely unfair.
He's actually only been in politics for 12 years. I mean, do you not think they could have waited till he was a bit older?
Do you think these things are... we were talking about diversity in politics earlier, and now you're saying the only people who can get honours have to be sort of, like me,
that's not what I'm saying at all. No, not at all. But I'm just saying, he was sacked by Theresa May. Or was he not sacked by Theresa May?
Yeah, he was. They had a dispute about whether he said he'd leaked.
That's right.
He said he hadn't. Well, she's the boss.
She still sacked him.
The thing is that there are so many people who have knighthoods who are idiots. So there's nothing unusual about this particular individual getting it. But I think there's an important point here, which is that, as Daniel quite rightly says, he faced a very lazy teaching profession and very kind of fierce teaching trade unions who were determined to stay in a lockdown in perpetuity. That's what they were into. But the thing you have to remember is that he did nothing to take them on. You would expect a political leader to have the courage to say, look, our children need to be educated, our children need to be back in school. We need a proper examination system. You have to remember that in Europe, English schools stayed in a lockdown than any other country except for Italy. I mean, that cannot be right. It cannot be right that we went into this lockdown. And I think that he played an undistinguished role. The only good thing that he's ever done as education secretary was to insist that working class people, or provide working class children with Latin lessons, which I thought was a brave and intelligent move, a blow for academic education. But otherwise, he's probably the worst education secretary in my memory.
So, Peymana, the teachers are all lazy lefties. And
I take serious.
Oh no, he said that. He said that. And
not
Gavin
lefties, just lazy.
Williamson had an impossible task, and even Mother Teresa would have come out of it badly.
I take serious offence to this accusation that teachers are lazy or they're woke lefties.
Some of them are,
or whatever.
Not all of them, but some of them are.
I'm a school governor in my borough. I'm a school governor of 2 schools, and I see how hard teachers work day in, day out, and also how much they have to deal with the underfunding of education and the cuts that have been imposed on them by the Conservative government. We can't talk about teachers opposing this without discussing the fact that they have not been listened to, that they have not been respected, and their profession hasn't been respected. They opposed a lot of the changes during the pandemic, especially for the GCSE and A-level grading during the pandemic. Did Gavin Williamson listen to them? No. So my question is, what exactly has he done to deserve this? And the other point is that only like a few years ago, was it 2 or a year ago, there was a press report about Gavin Williamson getting a knighthood in the future because he's got secrets about Boris Johnson hiding in the closet. So is this a reason? Has he received this knighthood in order to keep Boris Johnson's secrets covered up?
Has he?
Well, that's the most ridiculous. It is the most ridiculous accusation because now that he's got the knighthood, Boris can work this out. Yeah. What are you going to do to stop him releasing the secrets? It's because he hasn't got any secrets. It's all complete rubbish, this. And typical Labour slur and typical pile-on for every education secretary. They drove Gove out as education secretary, even though everyone now accepts he's probably the best education secretary.
I'm not sure they do.
For a very long time indeed. And the reforms he introduced are now bedded in.
I don't think children...
They drove him out. They have a go at everybody. You just can't discuss education
I don't think students
without walking into a woke, left-wing, poisonous atmosphere.
No, I don't think students in school would agree with what you've just said. I think if you went and spoke to students across the country, they would tell you that he was probably the worst education secretary. Students, yeah. Students in this country would say that he was probably the worst education secretary in history.
Well, there's Estelle Morris. There's a number of Labour education secretaries.
I think it just plays into this idea that we were talking about earlier about trust of politicians and whether these gongs are kind of given out when they're deserved. Matty has got in touch to say, hi, GB News. The honours list was trashed when Tony Blair was in number 10. If your bank account is big enough, you can make the list. Omar says so many bad examples, also many of them undeserving. I now doubt the relevance. The award has become a joke. And Harvey says the knighthood is not just devalued, it is a farce. I am appalled at all who've received knighthoods for mismanaging the pandemic. OK, moving on. Finally, it is time for generations to come closer. Is it time for generations to come closer? It's a little bit of a lighter note, this. It's almost 7 o'clock on a Friday. Oh, and there's a story in the papers today which we liked. It's caught our eye. Author Ben Aitken has written a book, and he's written a great article in the paper today explaining what it was about. And there is an organisation called Share and Care. It's Home Share. It brings together pairs of people who need a room with people who have some help around the house. And in this situation, Ben Aitken, who is 34, was put in a house share with Winnie, who is 84. And he's written a book about this experience. Now, do you think, Frank, we've seen families fractured so much over the last couple of years? Do we need to work harder to bring generations together? Because I know, for one, that my children get a huge amount from their relationship with their grandparents.
Absolutely. I think in France, there has been a scheme like this, where young university students stay with elderly people, and they provide support for them. They do a bit of cleaning, and in return, they interact with each other. And I think that's just wonderful. I think that one of the biggest crimes in our society, cultural crimes, is that we devalue old people and we marginalize them, whereas they could play such an active role in the socialization of young kids. And we just got to somehow mobilize them, recruit them, and bring them in a much more dynamic relationship with especially young children, who love talking to old people.
Yeah.
I mean, they do love talking, and we just got to bring them closer together. And I think this is a wonderful initiative.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. Paimana, how about you? Is your family and your weekend, what does your weekend look like? Do you hang out with your family?
Yes, I do. But my grandma passed away last year, and I actually really miss her, just hanging out with her. So I think this is a really, really nice thing that brings generations together. I think in 2015, Holland actually enacted this, where students started living with more senior citizens in the country, and it actually reduced the level of loneliness in Holland. So I think that it's a really nice thing to try and bring generations together.
Daniel, how about you? We've seen families, you know, under a huge amount of pressure in the last couple of years, and you don't have grandchildren, we were discussing, but do you still see the need and the value, really, isn't it, in not making sure that we don't stay divided?
Well, I don't want to be the controversial one. That's all right. I mean, in principle,
but you don't care.
In principle, this is a complete fairy story. It's absolutely lovely. It's the first, not the first example. I've come across other examples have been reported, and it's an absolute fairy story. It's simply wonderful, and we can all say how marvellous it is. In a family context, grandparents, parents, children interacting, you have more than two people in the room. I just worry about the next scandal of the abused granny.
Are you so cynical?
One-to-one, where your student moves in, and the next thing you know, and there's no way out for the abused granny. I'm absolutely serious
Oh, Daniel,
about
this was meant to be our Aunt Finalist story to go into the Friday on a bit of a high note.
You do social services in local authorities for a number of years, like I did. You do social services, and you think about these things.
I'm going to have to close the harbinger of doom there. Thank you to all of you for watching. Thank you so much. Michelle will be back on Monday. Have a lovely weekend. Coming up next is Patrick Christie.
Hello, Alex Deakin here with your latest weather updates. The weekend will have some spring sunshine, but also still a wintry feel as things remain pretty chilly, particularly over eastern England, where this weather front has been lingering through the day today and will stick around into Saturday. High pressure is toppling in from the west, and that will bring largely clear skies, and that will allow a frost, because Scotland and Northern Ireland temperatures already dropping pretty rapidly. There's that weather front still bringing rain and drizzle from North Yorkshire down across Lincolnshire, East Anglia and the southeast, lingering throughout the night. Elsewhere, most places dry, but those temperatures dropping close to freezing even in towns and cities. Rural spots across Scotland, Northern Ireland, maybe as low as -4 or -5. So a cold start here, but generally a cracking start if you like blue skies. And there'll be plenty of sunshine across Scotland, Northern Ireland, northwest England, Wales and southwest England during Saturday. For the Midlands eastwards, though, expect fairly cloudy skies, and at times we are going to see some outbreaks of rain. In fact, for much of the day, East Anglia in the southeast staying dull and dank and quite chilly, just 5 or 6 in Hull, Lincoln, maybe up to 7 in Norwich. But further west with some sunshine, 8, 9, possibly as high as 10 Celsius. Quite quickly, though, those temperatures will drop with the clear skies once more over Scotland, Northern Ireland on Saturday night. The rain will start to trickle its way back across the Midlands, tending to peter out as it does so, but still, as we head into the weekend, a bit of patchy rain likely over the Midlands, maybe South Wales, South West England seeing 1 or 2 showers early on Sunday. For most, though, Sunday is a dry day. Again, plenty of sunshine across the north. For the south, well, it won't be as damp for East Anglia and the southeast, but there will be a fairly brisk wind blowing. Temperatures on Sunday, well, we start sub-zero for many, up to 7, 8, 9 Celsius, but feeling colder in the south with that easterly wind.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.